Hello and welcome to the No Holds Barred Witchcraft podcast, a podcast for witches who are cultured like a bacteria. So today's episode we're talking about Cinderella because we're continuing along the series that Chris made up, which was something along the lines of occult stuff within like Disney and that series. And we're going to be talking about the Disney version of Cinderella, and we're going to mix some occultism and magic in with it. So I suppose you need to explain first of all what this old story, one of the most ancient stories, is it older than Jesus, this Cinderella thing? Over to you, Chris.
Literally, you and your setups just get more and more convoluted as they go on.
Intros, not setups, Chris. Intro.
Setups. They are setups. Right. I suppose we start with the kind of Disney story, don't we? And then we move back from that. Yeah?
That's what I said.
That's not what you said, but that's what we'll do. Right. So everyone, I'm sure, has seen Cinderella or some version of it. And I'm pretty sure Disney have made like 2 more versions that just went straight to DVD or whatever it was because they were too crap for actual release. Anyway, so Cinderella is about a girl whose daddy dies.
A cinder
wench.
That's what the name is originally.
Yeah,
Sorry, I won't interrupt anymore.
So professional here at No Holds Barred, totally. Right, yes, Cinder Wench was a maiden whose daddy died and therefore was left with her stepmother and her 2 daughters, ugly sisters,
stepmonster,
who treated her appallingly. And then one day, a prince decides he needs a bird. So there's an outward call for a big party at the palace where all the eligible women in the land get the chance to try and woo him. She manages to do it, even though they try to stop her. That is the ugly sisters. She loses her shoe because he's an idiot. And then he uses the shoe to find her, marry her, and live happily ever after.
Okay, so how do we mix some occultism with that? What's going on magically speaking here?
Okay, so how she gets her new threads after the ugly sisters ruin her dress that the rats and the birdies made for her. She gets the dress and a carriage and everything made by Bibbidi Bobbidi Boo by her Fairy Godmother. So I think we can start there.
Okay. Have you been drinking?
I haven't, but I've been waiting a really long time for you to get it together.
Okay.
So
right. Okay, so basically we've got a transfiguration turning pumpkins into carriages.
Yes.
We've got
animals into coachmen.
We've also got at one point her she asks her father for a gift, the first basically twig or branch that falls on his head.
That's one of the original stories.
Is that not in the Disney version?
It's not in the Disney version.
Oh.
That is from, I believe, was it Charles Perrault's version?
Oh, well, that's a bit crap, because I had a whole thing about taking twigs and then growing plants with them in the garden, working with plants in the garden and raising things magically and mandrakes and all that. We can't put that in there because it's not in the Disney version.
We can.
Well, I basically just said it all.
That's the original version. So one of the original versions. So the Charles Perrault version is when Daddy's still alive. He isn't dead.
He's just interested.
he just isn't interested because he's got a new woman and she's got new kids. So with that one, they obviously ask him for pretty dresses, and she asks him for the first branch or twig that falls on his head on his way home.
Why does she ask that?
Well, because she's clearly a witch. That's why.
I see. Right.
I reckon she's clearly a witch in that version. There is no ifs or buts about it, because she then plants the tree, the branch, and it grows.
Yeah.
So obviously, if it was a twig, that wouldn't happen.
And the tree is loyal to her. The plant spirit within the tree is loyal to her.
Because she waters it with her tears.
Yes. Do you water your plants with your tears, or do you use other people's
don't cry.
tears? Do you use other people's tears? Do you just grab the neighbour's kid and bring him out? That would be the sort of thing a witch would do, isn't it? In Disney. It would.
I'm not that much of a monster, although you try to portray me as one.
I don't need to. I just need to not say anything, and you do it to yourself most of the time. particularly after the watershed on the Patreon only version of this podcast, he goes a bit kind of. The power goes to his head, and he comes out with all sorts
bit
of
feral.
things. Yeah, exactly.
Bit feral. No, so that's not in the Disney version. However, it is an interesting part of the transformation, because obviously that includes the slightly more grim versions, where the birds that roost are loyal to her. Oh. So then she gets familiars and shit.
Oh, but are they familiars? Because I watched this certain live video you did for the Witchcraft live group, and you said a person's cat or animal isn't actually their familiar.
No, but this isn't. You don't know if these are actual birds, do we?
Well, no, they're not. They're cartoons.
She plants the tree, and then the birds come. You don't know if those birds might not be. Whereas in the Disney version, they clearly are birds. They belong to the household. They are pets of the slightly more feral variety.
Okay. So where are we going to start with this then? Transfiguration?
So, Transfiguration is a good place to start.
Okay.
So, converting pumpkins into carriages. How would you go about that, Liam?
How would I go about converting a pumpkin into a carriage?
Yeah.
Well, nowadays, the modern carriage isn't so much a kind of horse-drawn thing. It's probably something like a Bugatti Veyron.
Yeah, exactly.
So, would you rather convert a pumpkin into a Bugatti Veyron, or are you thinking that the tax and insurance on that would be too much? So are we just going to go for like a standard Ferrari?
Yeah.
The common person's car, the Ferrari.
Go on. I don't know how you work that shape, to be honest, myself.
Well, you carve it. It's pumpkin carving, isn't it? Have you never done Halloween?
But you wouldn't end up...
There's this thing we do in the UK called Halloween, and we stole the idea from the Americans, who stole it from the Irish with turnips. So we basically carve pumpkins. In fact, I don't know if you're that drunk not to remember that you carved a pumpkin on Christmas, and you can actually see Chris chatting away, carving a pumpkin on the Thoth TV YouTube channel. It got a lot of hits, actually, considering. And you were just nattering away at something.
My point is, symmetry is there, sympathetic magic kind of going on when you look at the pumpkin and the carriage. The carriage looks like the pumpkin.
Yeah.
How are you doing a pumpkin to a Ferrari? Please explain.
Okay, I will explain.
Are we squashing? Are we squashing the pumpkin?
I will explain. Okay. There's this thing called representational magic, and guess what? Not everyone uses it. Not everyone uses representational magic. Now, within witchcraft, a lot of people use sympathetic and representational magic. Some people just work energetically, and then other people just utilize other things. Like, for example, I may not be using the transfiguration method, because technically within Cinderella is actual transfiguration from one thing to the next. Like in Harry Potter, when is it McGonagall turns someone into a rat or something? I forget. Something like that happens, doesn't it? Yeah?
No, it's birds. It's birds into water goblets.
Which don't someone gets turned into a rat?
No, he
Malfoy.
tries to do it on his rat,
Oh, right, okay, that was it. The rat gets turned
and
into a
then it's a
goblet.
water
Yeah,
goblet
okay.
with a rat tail on it.
Oh, see, yeah, I forgot that. I thought someone got turned into a rat. No, Malfoy gets
No,
turned into something, doesn't he?
gets turned into a ferret.
Oh, I've just had a psychic inkling come in then. I feel like Lady Poison's saying, shut the up and get on with what you're talking about. Because I know she listens. I just had it come through strong then.
Well, you're the one. You're the one that felt the
Oh,
need to turn a pumpkin into a Ferrari, as opposed to
the,
what actually is
the
going on in the story. But carry on.
The force is strong with this one. Well, I'm just saying that you don't want a carriage, do you? Nowadays, you're not going to want a carriage.
Not
So
unless you're
I'm thinking
burying
that
someone.
nowadays people seem to want Ferraris, so I wouldn't be able to use a pumpkin for transfigurational magic. Otherwise, it'd be a pumpkin-shaped Ferrari. So what I would probably do is utilize a jar spell with the pumpkin, and instead of using a jar, use a pumpkin for my contents. And much like we like to do with some of your clients, I'm particularly thinking about the one that made a bomb and put in your garden that year. If we put loads of magic in that, created a bomb type spell, they're single use, unfortunately, and done some manifestation magic. Because you know
The
it's all
public
about the
pumpkin would
intention, Chris.
explode,
It's all
and
about the
out the
intention.
inside would come a Ferrari. Is that what we're saying?
Well, I'm not sure if the Ferrari would come from the inside. I'm thinking I would have to sue you and then buy the Ferrari with the money I get. I mean, there's magic in there somewhere.
So, but then you've done a money spell rather than a transfiguration.
Hey,
I'm not impressed.
whatever yeah, I'm not really one for transfiguration, if I'm honest with you. It's not something that really intrigues me all that much. I've never been interested in transfiguration. I certainly don't like
Okay.
teaching it.
Okay. Well, next on the list then, guardian angels or fairy godmothers. How do you feel about them?
Well, I'm not entirely sure, if I'm honest with you, the guardian angels are an actual thing. Are they a type of angel? Or are they just basically, spirit guides that people think, well, I need to think of a fluffy name to call that spirit guide that looks out for me. Oh, I'll call it a guardian angel because I'm raised in a Christian kind of Western civilization. So we just liken good things to angels. Like that Earth
Okay.
Angels. Remember when we talked about that? We don't need to go there again.
No, because we promised that this was going to be a serious one.
Okay, okay. A serious one. I'm really struggling, but I will try. So where are we going with this?
So, guardian angels or fairy godmothers. So I can kind of answer. I'm kind of happy with the suggestion that obviously they are imaginary friends or spirit guides. I'm cool with that. I'm just wondering if you would have pushed it towards the kind of slightly more sinister fae side of it, of calling upon guardian spirits
Well,
who
the
would
the idea of
influence men
the idea
and women.
the idea of the fairy godmother is kind of like this little old lady that looks after you down the street. So when daddy hits mummy and you wake up in the middle of the night to hear her screaming, you're gonna run to the neighbour's house. And the neighbour that looks after you and says, there, that's your fairy godmother. I don't know, I'm just thinking of Little Dowels. That's
Oh
a
my
place
god.
near where I used to live. I mean, people used to
I'm
call
really
her
sorry,
people used to
everybody.
call her the fairy godmother because she used to look after everyone. I mean, it was a rough council estate, but she used to look after everyone when she was a lovely old lady. She couldn't have kids of her own, so she used to look after everyone else's children. Sweet old lady. She's still alive as well, actually. But I think of a fairy godmother not as in fae. No, I think of fairy godmother as in an older person. I kind of think of Fairy Godmother as cunning, wise woman. That's how I kind of
Okay,
think of
that's an
Fairy
interesting
Godmother,
approach.
as a corporeal being. There's someone that's
Okay,
got the magic that just weaves in and out of your kind of destiny and time, like we do
I
occasionally with
suppose.
people. We know something that's going on. We know we need to intervene in a situation. We just turn up randomly. The person's like, "What the heck's going on here?"
And then give them a
You
Ferrari.
give them a load of advice, and then you leave. And then they're like, did that
Okay.
happen? Are they real? And then they bump into us in the future at some psychic fair and they say, well, you are actually a person. I thought I imagined you when I was sobbing away on that park bench that time.
I quite like that concept. Okay, you saved yourself. We'll let you off for the
Well, if you think
indiscretions
that's
earlier.
good, I got some amazing things about glass slippers.
Oh, okay. We'll get to those in a moment. Different variations of the story include different forms. It always seems to be a shoe. Some of them get a bit more grim, as in grim fairy tales. See what I did there?
I see what you did.
Um,
That's very clever.
with those ones, obviously, they're a lot more sinister and grim. So they cut the parts of their feet off in order to try and fit
Yeah.
in the shoes. I like those. But that's closer to the Chinese version of it, isn't it?
Oh,
Where they're actually talking about foot binding.
well, they still do
I
that over
think
there,
that's where
don't
that
they?
comes
I
from.
think they
I
still
think
do
in
it.
some parts of the culture still
Yeah.
do. It's heavily frowned upon though.
Yeah, but a lot of
Um,
things are. Ghost weddings are frowned upon. It still happens.
yeah, exactly. But yeah, so the shoe, I kind of get in that moment. I quite like their switch to the glass version as being a bit more of a unique one to kind of deal with the fact that, come on, surely not many people have that many weird shaped shoes, feet rather, and like being able to see through the glass
Hmm.
in order to see it fits properly. I get that. So I can see why they stuck with that version. What have you got cool things to say about glass slippers then?
Well, I was thinking the idea there was two things. One, I was thinking about stealing someone's weights and measures in secret societies, but
Oh,
that's more
okay.
of a Patreon only thing, I think.
We'll come
Um,
back to that.
and then the transparency that you basically picked up on. That originally, I think these shoes were like silk or fur and that kind of thing.
Yeah,
But the fact
a
that
few gold
you
ones.
can actually see through it to see whether it actually does fit, and also I think the test, because there's a test at the end of the day, isn't it?
Yeah,
The fact that you either pass the test easily or you break it, and you break the slipper or the glass shoe, because glass is quite fragile, really, and
yeah,
it's not flexible like a typical shoe. You can kind of squeeze your feet into it and hunch them up,
yeah,
whereas the transparency there is a pure test, almost like a
yeah,
perfect test. The idea of the weights and measures is that a lot of the time covens and secret societies and that will take a person's weights and measures, much like you think about stealing biologicals and blood and that kind of thing.
yep,
Upon initiation, a lot of people will take um, biologicals, but also measurements from the body. They could be specific measurements from, say, height, weight, that kind of thing, but generally is considered to be weights and measures because everyone's basically unique. So mixing together your weights and your measures is basically a link to you specifically. Very often it's utilized with contract. So if you agree for initiation on something, you would offer up your weights and measures, they would be taken, and it would be kind of like a binding initiation. The only
okay,
reason I mention that is because of the fact that the whole shoe slipper thing is transparent and it's essentially a unit of weight and measurement. It's the perfect foot going in there, and
yeah,
the fact that you can't really cheat on it either.
no,
But
no, I like
my
that.
mind works
I
in
like that
mysterious
idea.
ways.
Well, you are a strange one.
Yeah.
So, okay, so slippers, glass. Like I said, I quite like the transparency factor of that. It kind of makes total sense.
Another
The
thing, sorry.
no, go on.
I was going to say another thing you basically reminded me of when earlier we were talking about obviously creating the new candles, glass candles, as deity candles and
Yeah,
stuff like that. And you were saying about, obviously, are we going to use tin or are we going to use glass jars? And about glass being kind of neutral. And I'm thinking
yeah,
in terms of the judge is the slipper, and the
okay.
slipper must remain neutral. And
I
then you're
like
kind of
that.
thinking the, weighing of the heart and all that kind of thing in the
Yeah,
Egyptian mysteries. The person who's the judge should remain completely neutral, and I find glass quite neutral and transparent. Perfect
yeah,
justice. I like to involve glass with justice because justice can be very fragile as well, actually.
very
Or
true, very true.
if you tip it one way or another, it shatters essentially. So people think of justice and justice-like spirits as like all this thing that's going to come down on you, and mess you up. When actually pure justice is, I don't know, I'd say pure justice is one of those
Clarity.
things that you have to be very, very careful with. And I think slightly unjust is it spoils and breaks.
Yeah, no, I get it. Glass would be smoky or dark,
Hmm.
would then mean bad. I like it. I like it a lot. The other big one I find in there, the big kind of theme in there is timings.
Yes.
So for that, it's kind of what's odd. I think is obviously a lot of the other versions, the party or is a festival or rather than like a one night thing. So she actually repeats the process in some of them. And one of them, like she wears better and better dresses each time to convince the prince to fall in love with her. Um, and then obviously some it's a case of she manages to get away on time the first time, then she's later. That's how she loses the shoe, and that kind of time of timing, magical timing, I guess, is the one that kind of interests me. But then weirdly, the version with the Chinese version of that, there's no mention of time at all. Like there's no deadline or anything like
Well,
that
that's very
in that
un-Chinese. They've
version.
always got deadlines.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So there's no deadline in that story, but then most of the others have this time, and I think all the modern versions, like post Disney, all have this kind of magical midnight
Yeah.
clock strikes 12, spell is broken kind of. Even in the stories that aren't actually Cinderella stories, that have that kind of flavour of, at the stroke of midnight you'll be ugly again. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Weak magic that doesn't last very long. It
yeah,
wears
and
off. But
which makes me
I
wonder.
wondering whether it's a cultural thing, because if you think about the festivals, like you said, pagan festivals or ancient festivals would have lasted a long time.
Yeah,
You'd get it for a month or so, a big lead up to something it would have lasted over several days and nights. Halloween these days is a day, whereas
yeah,
back then it would have been a whole big festival thing. But then you've also got the running out of time. It comes in, in a huge way within the Abrahamic religions and Christianity particularly. I see a lot of time, a lot
yeah,
of you have a finite time. This is the time you have until this to end it. You also have the idea of, well, actually, you're interfering with the greater universe, the greater good, the greater power. Therefore, you can only push the flow of water when you're making that little dam on the beach, if you ever did that as you were a kid. Eventually, you might be able to hold it back for a little bit, but you
yeah,
can't forever.
yeah. No, but I like that kind of aspect of magical timing that's in it. But also makes me wonder about, again, like you said, the power running out. That kind of, why is it so temporary?
Well, it depends on
She
the
needs to
approach.
needs to make a killer impression real quick because she's only got so long before she's going to look, I say, the same as she did before. It's not in like a glamour way. You don't get that kind of impression. It's kind of it's a big work, so therefore it needs lots of power, and then the power is going to burn out quick.
Yeah, I think it's using magical power to change something that's not supposed to be changed. And a
Yeah,
lot of the time with the sorts of, I wouldn't necessarily say Disney, but a lot of the time people think of the magical ingredients and the power there. There's a battery, and that actually all the battery's doing is keeping that running, kind of like a
yeah,
battery light, a torch.
yeah,
Well, the battery, when the battery runs out, the light goes off and it just goes back to darkness. Whereas I kind of think of it in terms of a more advanced work as about causing permanent change.
yeah,
So, and I wonder whether that's just in more ancient forms of magic, or the difference between more ancient practitioners. Is it bringing about changes and working with greater timings as opposed to lesser timings? Because I mean, look at back at ancient astrology and ancient things. You're talking about big cycles, and they're interested in big
yeah,
cycles. Nowadays, everyone's just interested in their little lives, little cycles within their short lives. It's all about astrology. Tell me my birth chart. Tell me all about my week. I want
yeah,
my 7-day reading. It's not really. That's
yeah,
why
yeah,
everyone keeps missing all these big things like coronavirus and that, because no one pays attention to the slightly bigger
no,
stuff.
they're no longer looking at that. It's anybody can have a tarot app now or whatever, or an astrology app. So therefore, it's been generalised, hasn't it, for popular consumption.
Yeah.
Whereas before, you'd have, only kings and important folk would have their own astrologer that would, you know, consult the auguries or whatever in order to answer those things. I just had another thought. I don't know if I'm going too left field with this one, but what about the temporary change to attract the bigger change? So, law of attraction of in that moment, she's um, looking like what she would do if she was a princess in
Ooh,
order to
okay.
force the attraction of the dress. Do you reckon that there's a am I going too off on that one, or is that a possibility
I
of
think you're talking about multiversal theory and mirror magic and that kind of thing, aren't you?
more than
It's
likely?
kind of a bit like
But just kind of like,
I think from the story's perspective, she did never intended to marry the prince. She just wanted to go to the
no,
party and feel
yeah,
like one of the rest of, feel normal almost. And she was given that opportunity that she wouldn't have normally been given through the use of magic. I wonder how many listeners get opportunities in life that they feel that they should get, but only get them when they use magic to meddle with things. And
yeah,
whether
no,
would
no,
you
no,
consider that to be actually meddling? Because I wouldn't. It's just that people
no,
don't have the power, and most people don't have the power to do that. But if you do have the power, I don't consider it meddling, because I hear a lot about this kind of, well, if you're using your magic, and back in the day, early Wicca and stuff, oh, well, I wouldn't, Gerald Gardner says, oh, I would never use magic for mundane things like to bring money in and all that kind of thing. And it's like, well, why not?
why not?
Kind of defeats the point. Otherwise, what's the point? It's just, and it also, I think, cheapens it. To say that magic is innately part of the human existence and a part of you, to deny your abilities there is to kind of
Yeah,
put magic on a pedestal of, well, this isn't really for you. You're lucky to have this. And we don't
yeah,
view magic like that.
no,
Do you know that? What?
it's
It's almost out of time. We've got like a minute left.
wow. So yeah, what anything you want to kind of hit before it goes over to the Patreons?
I haven't watched Cinderella for a long, long time, but I did read the synopsis. There's things. I don't know really. I mean, there's the kind of the idea of the magic being used in Cinderella, and a lot of Disney is supporting the underdog. And when you think
Yeah,
of witchcraft and the origins of witchcraft and that, and it is really like a poor person's magic, isn't it?
yeah, it is.
Witchcraft is the people's magic.
Something spectacular happening to somebody that doesn't matter.
Yeah, I suppose. I was just thinking of it in terms of the everyday people use magic, and the all the courts and kings and queens and that they have their ceremonial magicians and stuff. But I think we are out of time, so goodbye everyone.